Can the Carolina Panthers contain Saquon Barkley and the Eagles' rushing attack? I'll give you my 3 keys to victory versus Philadelphia right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays for the rest of the regular season, I'll be right here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council following the game on Sunday. Then next Wednesday, I'll answer your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And on today's show, we're talking keys to victory. Carolina, sitting at 3-9, needs to win on Sunday, win next Sunday, and win the rest of their games to finish out 8-9 and get a lot of help in the NFC South in order to win the NFC South and go to the playoffs and host a home playoff game, which has not happened, God, man, since 2015. So that's very unlikely to happen. But the Panthers still have a path. The Falcons are sitting there at 6-6. Tampa, who beat them last week, is also at 6-6. Carolina will play both of those teams in the final remaining weeks. Also, those teams have to play some of the better teams in the NFL. They got to play the Vikings and the Chargers. There are losses still out there for both the Bucs and both the Falcons, including potentially to these Carolina Panthers. But first off, the Panthers got to take care of business on Sunday against a team in Philadelphia that has won 8 straight games in the NFL and is looking like one of the Super Bowl contenders in the league, right up there with Detroit and Buffalo and Kansas City. So let's go over the keys to victory and how Carolina can get to 4-9 and position themselves in the final 4 weeks to potentially come out of nowhere to win the NFC South. Number one, they got to contain the run. They're not going to stop the run. Let's just be very honest about this right now. I was at the barbershop on Thursday, had Sean, one of our listeners who actually said what's up to me, and he had asked me, hey, can we stop Saquon? I said, no, they're not going to stop Saquon. They're probably not going to contain Saquon Barkley, but that's the only way they can win this game and keep it close on Sunday in what may be a low possession game because of Philadelphia's prowess to run the ball, and also Carolina at least expressing, maybe not doing it as much as we would like to see, wanting to be stubborn about running the ball. So this could be a low possession game on Sunday in Philadelphia, and quite possibly that plays into the advantage of Carolina. Do you want Philadelphia getting a ton of possessions? Maybe not, but if that means a low possession game, that probably means Philadelphia is able to run down the clock by rushing the football. We'll see how it all plays out. But either way, Carolina's not going to stop the run. They got to find a way to contain the run on Sunday, and they have really, well, not done that all season long. They're ranked last in the NFL, as we know, against the run. They've allowed 2,002 yards so far this season. Last year, the Panthers were 23rd against the run in the NFL, and they gave up 2,081 yards. So 79 more yards that they gave up last year, but that was in 17 games. So far through 13 games, they've given up 79 yards less than what they gave up total last year. That obviously is not ideal. The Eagles are second in the NFL in rushing yardage and rushing yards per attempt. Saquon Barkley leads the NFL in rushing yards and also in rushing attempts. He has been outstanding for Philadelphia, a team that lost Miles Sanders to Carolina last year in free agency. As we know, Miles has not had a great go of it in his 2 seasons in Carolina. Philadelphia had to figure out who are they going to bring in this year to help get the run game back to where it was when they went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. And what do you know? Went up right up I-95, got Saquon Barkley from the Giants, their division rival, and he has been outstanding this season and likely, I think not even likely, he's definitely going to lead the NFL in rushing, and quite possibly, depending on how things go in Buffalo, Josh Allen could be the league MVP. And this would be a game where he can stack on those totals and make his MVP case. But if that happens, well, the Panthers are going to win this game. So they got to prevent Saquon from having one of those MVP performances. They're not going to stop the run again, but at least find a way again to contain it. And what does that look like? The last 2 weeks, the Panthers have allowed 6.1 yards and 6.3 yards per rush attempt against Kansas City and Tampa Bay, respectively. They allowed 167 yards on the ground against the Giants back in Munich, but only 4.9 yards per rush in that OT win. Go to the week prior to that against New Orleans at home. They allowed 197 yards to the Saints, but only 4.8 yards per rush. The Panthers are 26th in the NFL in rushing yards allowed per attempt at 4.8. If they stay right there on their average, they have shown, even in games when they're giving up 167 and 197 yards on the ground, they can win. Just don't get gashed like they did last week with Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. I didn't really feel like Kansas City gashed them that much, but they had a ton of successful runs in that game, including the one at the end where Pat Mahomes ran down the sideline. Just don't give up those big chunk plays and make them really earn it. And then you can have a chance, as we saw in those wins against the Giants and the Saints. Now, Philadelphia is a lot different than New York and New Orleans. Same case with Tampa and Kansas City. So we'll see if Carolina can do this, but they got to find a way to contain the run on Sunday. Number 2, be aggressive. Twice last week, Dave Canales decided to kick a field goal on 4th and 1 and 4th and 2 in plus territory. One of them was good from 47. The other was no good from 45. And both times, fans rained down boos on their first-year head coach, and rightfully so. I can agree with Canales afterwards saying, I wanted to get the points on the board to go down 7-3 instead of not getting it there, where the Panthers have had some issues in short yardage situations. We saw that actually later on in that game, and we've seen it at points of times throughout the season. So I can understand wanting to get the points, but then you're 3-9. You're kicking from 45, and that's not a guarantee. Now it should be, and Eddie Pinheiro had a rough Sunday. I think he'll bounce back this Sunday. The only thing is, I don't want to see Eddie attempting those field goals, especially if it's a 4th and 1, a 4th and 2, hell, a 4th and 3, and the Panthers are at the Eagles 39 or at the Eagles 40. Doesn't matter to me. You're 3-9. If you want to have any shot at making the playoffs, which is probably not going to happen, you have to win this game and the following 4 games. And by doing that, you got to be aggressive. You can't just sit there, take the points, kick field goals. That's why they have not won these games the last couple of weeks. They're settling for a field goal on that drive. They're making it. They're selling another time and not making it. And you look at the game prior to that against Kansas City, 4 times. They kicked field goals. You're not going to beat a team like Kansas City. You're not going to be a team like Tampa last week. You're definitely not going to be a team who's red hot like Philadelphia, not being aggressive and just taking field goals and taking the points. There's nothing to lose other than the game, and you've already lost 9, and you're not going to be a playoff team anyways based off of how things have gone and just the likelihood moving forward with what is not an easy remaining schedule here to close out 2024. So be aggressive. What do you have to lose? Other than the game, you're not going to lose your job. What's the big deal? Try to win the game. Number 3, they got to finish. And the reason why Carolina's sitting here at 3-9 instead of potentially 4-8, maybe 5-7 is they have not finished these last 2 games. They did not finish in the red zone the last 2 weeks. They are 3 of 10 in the red zone. They were 0 for 1 in goal-to-go situations last week against Tampa, where Tampa was 2 for 2, and they were better in the red zone than Carolina. That's just not going to get it done again against a good team in Philadelphia that's reeled off 8 straight games like it didn't work against Kansas City, who also had their own red zone struggles. Carolina had 1 extra red zone trip than KC, and they were not able to capitalize where Kansas City went 2 for 5, Carolina went 2 for 6, and Kansas City also hit on some chunk plays and the plays that needed to happen. And when you look at it now, heading into that game against the Chiefs, I think Carolina was 10th in the NFL in red zone touchdown scoring percentage. Right now, they're 17th. The Eagles are 5th in red zone defense. So a tall task now going up against a top 5 defense in terms of red zone defense on Sunday when Carolina's really struggled the last couple of weeks. And Canales said it's more about chemistry and really having some of those guys out there that can build upon that. And you got to be in the right kind of situations. Kansas City had the right calls. Tampa Bay also as well. Okay, scheme it up better. Find a way to win. And potentially JT Sanders plays on Sunday. Jalen Coker comes back. That can help, as those guys are some bigger bodied red zone threats for Carolina. Also, you look at it in the games that they've won recently against the Saints and the Giants, Carolina was 5 for 6 in the red zone. So when they are getting about 87%, I think that's what the percentage is at 5 for 6, they're right there winning those games. When they're going 3 for 10, 30%, they're losing those games. It's not that simple, but it feels pretty straightforward that you got to finish in the red zone with touchdowns if you want to win games week in and week out in the NFL. And they had the 2 missed field goals last week. That's one of the things where you don't want to rely on your kicker. Yes, Eddie's got to make it from 47, the other one from 38. He cannot miss those kicks, but you're sitting there not closing out the drives. Get deeper down the field and actually get into the red zone and punch it in. And you look at the defense as well last week. They played really well for 3 quarters and then completely fell apart there in that 4th quarter where they gave 176 yards after only allowing 181 yards in the first 3 quarters. That's just, as we saw, not going to get it done. And when your offense scores a touchdown and has a 3-point lead, they're not able to get off the field and prevent Tampa from kicking that 51-yard field goal to tie the game. And then you look at it in overtime, the defense gets a stop, the offense gets the ball back, and then they fumble. And I'm sitting here understanding that Chuba Hubbard, you can't fumble in that situation, but he should have never been in that situation. It should have never gone to overtime. Eddie should have made those kicks. Dave should have been more aggressive. The Panthers should have not given up all they gave up defensively in that 4th quarter. And then we're not even sitting here having the conversation about Chuba Hubbard fumbling and having fundamentals and holding onto the football with 2 hands. He should have never been in that situation because the Panthers should have never had this be a game in the first place. And yeah, the non-touchdown that was a touchdown that got called back. Thielen himself said it again today that, yeah, should have caught it the first time, which I told y'all last week, while also understanding should have been called a touchdown. And not having enough cameras is ridiculous. The Panthers got to finish the catch, got to finish the drive, got to finish the tackle, finish, and you can beat a team in Philadelphia on Sunday. So finish, be aggressive, and contain Saquon Barkley in a run game, if that is possible at all for this Carolina Panthers defense. More signs are pointing towards Bryce Young being a starting quarterback again in 2025. We'll talk about that and what the Panthers may need to do to help Bryce in 2025 here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners can get an extra $30 off with promo code NFL and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply. Missing someone this holiday season and want them to be a part of your festivities from afar? Do your loved ones live far away but wish they could be close to you? We've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos of your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. Invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email. It only takes a tap on your phone to send new photos to a frame across the country. It's the fastest, easiest way to keep loved ones in the loop. They'll feel so much more connected to you. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's lightframe.com/NFL. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. Is it fair to say that 2024 has been one of the stranger seasons for a Carolina Panthers quarterback in the 30-season history of this franchise? Like, look at it. Bryce Young came into the year with a lot of hope that with Dave Canales as his play caller, as his head coach, he would be able to deliver Bryce Young to play the same kind of high-level football he got out of Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield the last 2 seasons in Seattle and in Tampa Bay. And we all understand that Carolina gave up a ton to get Bryce Young. They gave up Christian McCaffrey to get some assets in order to potentially move up in the draft. They did move up in the draft using some of those assets they got from the McCaffrey trade with San Francisco, gave up DJ Moore, the number 1 overall pick this past year's draft, and their second rounder in 2025. So, of course, they were going to try to do everything they could in their power to help their second-year quarterback, who effectively, I guess, was getting a second rookie year under a new coaching staff with better offensive line and more pass catchers around him. But it did not work the first 2 weeks of the year, as he was just god-awful in that loss against New Orleans, where Carolina was non-competitive. He was even worse the next week against the Chargers in that home opener, where, again, the Panthers were non-competitive. I was saying, just keep playing him. It will get better. He's got to play through it. But Dave Canales didn't want to do that. He felt like the best thing for the team was to move on from Bryce right then and there and hand things over to Andy Dalton. And you could not criticize him based off of what the Panthers were able to do offensively in that game against the Raiders. And that's still the best passing performance of the season, the 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns that Andy threw that afternoon in Las Vegas against the Raiders. And then the following week played well against Cincinnati in that loss. But after that, it wasn't like Andy was playing that great. And because of that, question week after week after week, people were wondering, would he ever go back to Bryce? And Dave Canales was steadfast that Andy Dalton gave them the best opportunity to win. And that was going to likely be the scenario moving forward had there not been a car accident. We'll never know, would he have gone back to Bryce Young if Andy Dalton kept playing some pretty mid football like he was playing after those 2 strong performances against the Bengals and against the Raiders. I don't know. And based off everything that Dave Canales was saying, it's hard for me to sit here now in week 14 with Bryce set to make his 6th straight start and believe that Dave was going to go back to Bryce Young as starting quarterback later on in the season. It would behoove the Panthers, had that been the case, if Carolina was continuing to lose games, that they would have gone back to Bryce. But it doesn't really matter now because they've gone back to Bryce. And he has played the best that he's ever played in his short career here in Carolina. The game last week, thought he was excellent. The game before that against Kansas City, I thought was his best, and I still believe is the best game he's played as a Panther. Maybe not statistically, but it looked pretty doggone good. And you look at the game against the Saints, that win, game against the Giants, he looked good, took care of the football in those 2 wins as well. Like, we're starting to see that development that we all hoped to have seen from Bryce Young. And because we have seen that, signs are pointing towards Bryce Young being the quarterback again here in 2025. And possibly beyond, and everything working out the way the Panthers hoped it would work out in the end. Now, did they get to this point the way they thought maybe they were going to get there? Well, of course not. Frank Reich's no longer in Carolina. Thomas Brown's no longer in Carolina. Josh McCown, that whole offensive coaching staff is done. I don't think they expected Bryce to be benched 4 or 5 games in the middle of the season. That progress is not always linear. We all understand that. But it's been a lot weirder than anyone would have expected when Bryce Young was taken number 1 overall. And, of course, once Dave Canales is brought in here this past offseason to come and work with Bryce Young. Now, Jeremy Fowler talked about what he had to report last week about Bryce Young, him and Dan Graziano of ESPN.com to NFL Insiders. Fowler had another report on Thursday with some intel about Bryce potentially coming back in 2025 and what that may look like for the Carolina Panthers and who is actually to thank for this resurgence from Bryce Young. Jeremy Fowler saying this: Bryce Young's resurgence gives the Panthers an intriguing quarterback option for the future under Dave Canales. We know he's throwing the ball with more confidence and operating the offense well. After asking around, he's also learning how to become more vocal and showing more command and urgency. We heard about the post-game locker room speech following that loss against Kansas City, and there were plenty of guys in that locker room who talked about they really appreciated Bryce stepping up, and even one player saying, finally, We're finally seeing him show that kind of leadership that you want to see out of your potential franchise quarterback. Fowler goes on to say this: the Panthers always knew Young could read defenses pre-snap well, and now he's doing a better job of projecting that out to teammates and coaches. Quote, getting out of his brain into others in a clear and concise manner, according to one person with the team. That's a big step, and one that Andy Dalton undoubtedly helped him find. Learning from Dalton, who started in place of Young for 5 games during Young's benching, was crucial for the second-year quarterback's development. Sources said the Panthers wanted Young to observe and learn from Dalton, which he did. And I appreciate Jeremy Fowler putting it out there. The Panthers wanted Young to observe and learn from Dalton, which he's done. Why couldn't the Panthers just say that? That's been, I think, my frustration and several other people I've spoken to in the media, and maybe even y'all's frustration throughout this entire process, is that Dave Canales has never once come out and said it's about developing Bryce. Now, he said this is a developmental organization, but then he brings up Jalen Coker, who has turned out to be a nice find for Carolina as an undrafted free agent, but completely different when you're talking about a UDFA at a Holy Cross than when you're talking about the number 1 overall pick from a season ago in development. You need Bryce to develop. Obviously, you need Coker to develop. But you have spent so much time and energy and money into Bryce Young developing. It's just weird to me that he couldn't just simply say, we're benching him, we're trying to develop Bryce, we're not giving up on Bryce. Didn't say any of those words at any point in time, which I just found odd. And that's what led me to believe that he does not believe in Bryce. But over the last couple of weeks, he's made Bryce earn this job. And Bryce has earned it. And Bryce has certainly earned his trust, the trust of his teammates. And Bryce has also built upon his own confidence in the last couple of games. And he's better for it, for the benching, than I thought at the time, where I felt like it was over for Bryce Young, looking at the recent history of how things have played out for guys like Mac Jones, played out for Trey Lance, and played out for Zach Wilson, that once you get benched, you're basically done. And fortunately for Bryce, he got a second opportunity. Took a car accident, potentially for that to be the second opportunity. Maybe it was going to come at some point in time down the road, but we don't know. Now, looking at things, if Bryce Young is going to be back in 2025 as Panthers starting quarterback, they, of course, got to fix the defense. Offensively, there are questions on the offensive line, like what to do with Taylor Moton, who's going to be the starter at center long-term. Maybe Cade Mays wins that job over the final couple weeks of the season. Potentially they could retool some things as well. A guy like Damian Lewis has played center in the past. Maybe you move A.K. Quino into guard. If that's what they want to do, then they got to find a left tackle, and they could be in position to do that. As you look at the left tackle there at Texas, Kelvin, I forget his last name, but there are guys out there potentially Carolina could look at in this draft class if they wanted to do something like that. But I look at the skill position players. You got Jonathan Brooks, who showed some bursts, got some juice that we saw last week. Chuba Hubbard, of course, he's signed, going to be here at least the next 2 years. JT Sanders looking good. Xavier Legette looking good. Jalen Coker, some promise there with some of these young guys. But Johnson's gone. And speaking of Deontay Johnson, can we just go back and reevaluate that trade one more time? I felt like from the beginning, Mike Kay got it right when he reported how a league source told the Observer that the Panthers' asking price for Johnson was a 3rd-round pick, but the Steelers essentially pegged Johnson's value as a 6th-round pick when they traded him to Carolina in March. And he only played 7 games, and only 3 of those did he really play well. His value didn't go up tremendously from where his team, Pittsburgh, valued him as a 6th-rounder to where Carolina ended up getting a pick swap and getting up into the 5th round of Baltimore. And another thing, like when Mike Tomlin's done with you, clearly you're the problem, as we're seeing with Deontay Johnson, who refused to play last week in that Ravens loss to Philadelphia, and that's led him to be suspended for 1 game due to conduct detrimental to the team. And when you look at Carolina, the dude barely practiced over the last couple of weeks. He missed 7 practices in the 5 final weeks he spent in Carolina and hadn't been a full participant since week 3. He had a groin, an ankle, a hamstring, a rib, and he was talking about 1 week how he was rib felt fine and he could play. Then he didn't play that week. And was it because he didn't want to play, or was it because Carolina was trying to trade him away? Either way, it's very clear that the Panthers want to move on from Deontay Johnson. And when you look at the pick swap, Carolina so far has gained 21 spots from that trade. And it's not working well for the Ravens, and it wasn't necessarily working well for Carolina with Deontay as their number 1 receiver. Well, why do I bring up Deontay Johnson? Well, Carolina needs to go find someone who's an experienced potential number 1 receiver this offseason to truly replace him, potentially replace Adam Thielen. And I don't know whether Carolina wants to keep Adam around for next season or not. I would think that at age 35, they may want to move on from Adam Thielen and allow some of those younger guys an opportunity, and also go get an older, or not an older, but a younger proven commodity in the NFL, such as a T. Higgins, who we've talked about on the show over the last, year and a half, 2 years. Stephon Diggs, he's coming off an ACL, so that might not be a situation you want here. Chris Godwin, he's coming off of a significant leg injury, but he would be someone I'd look at as a younger option. Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, maybe not so much. Like, those right now are the top 5 pending free agent wide receivers. The Panthers got to find a way to get one of them, I would think, to come in here next year to pair with these young guys who do have some promise to them. But yeah, Bryce is coming back. Go get him some more help offensive skill-wise. You can't sit here and rely on the young guys when clearly there's other talent out there in the league that could definitely help you out. And yes, they're going to come along. They can be contributors in the future, but go out there and get more for your quarterback and what will be a very important year 3 if all signs truly are pointing towards him being the starter again in 2025. Let's take a look at the injury report. Jadeveon Clowney, yet again this week, not able to practice with a knee injury. Will he play on Sunday? Josey, Jewell also popping up on the injury report. Talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Hey, Locked On Panther fans, I know you're like me and your holiday shopping list is, let's just say, far from complete. Well, if that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fans in your life. Perhaps you've heard of the Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and Major League Baseball, and will make the ideal gift. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, Ice Shakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game of workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% off your order. And thanks to Ice Shaker, they sent me a nice Carolina Panthers branded Ice Shaker this week. They're kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that won't absorb odor like plastic bottles do. A patented twist-in agitator breaks up powders but is silent when you shake it instead of the annoying ball. The agitator works as a strainer as well and makes it a very solid tailgating cup to mix drinks. Order your team-branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams, the best branded workout bottles on the market. Ice Shakers. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And man, this line has not moved. The Panthers are plus 12.5. They are 12.5-point underdogs on the road in Philadelphia. It opened that way. It has stayed that way every single day. We have looked at that line this week on the show. The money line, though, is now back up to plus 560. So go get your cash. And the over-under set at 45.5. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's take a look at the Week 14 injury report for the Panthers. And the good thing, the last couple of weeks, there have not been 20 names on the injury report. This week, there's only about 7 or 8, which is very nice to see based off of how banged up this team was for a large portion of the season. And now they've gotten healthier. That has, I think, coincided with them playing better the last couple of weeks against 2 teams in Tampa, who I think is going to win the division here in the NFC South, and then Kansas City, who I think is getting away with it, but still only 1 loss. Clearly a very good team. Andy Reid, Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, they're all still there. So 2 really good performances for the Panthers post-bye, in large part because of the growth of Bryce Young, the confidence that Bryce Young has, and now the team has in him and his coach has in him, but also because they've gotten a lot healthier, and that certainly helps out. One player, though, who there's some questions about heading into the Sunday, Jadeveon Clowney. He has a knee injury, did not practice on Wednesday or on Thursday. That was the same case last week where he was unable to practice those 2 days, but then was limited on Friday, then was listed as questionable last Friday, and ended up playing 71% of the snaps versus Tampa Bay. I have no reason not to believe that won't be the same case again this week. He's a player who has been dealing with this since week 10, but post-bye, he's had to miss practice time because of it. There's also only been 3 weeks this season where he wasn't on the injury report, and he's barely practice on a Wednesday for the majority of the season. Most times it's rest. Other times there may be an injury listed, but I think it's more so they're just trying to manage that and manage his body. I would not be overly concerned about that as of this recording. Now, I'm doing this on Thursday evening. You're listening to this likely either on Thursday night or on Friday morning. Can also talk around 2 o'clock on Friday and let you know what the deal is. Now, Jewell, though, he popped up there with a hamstring, was limited on Wednesday, did not practice on Thursday. That is concerning as we talk about this on the crossover episode on Thursday with Gino Camilleri of Locked On Eagles. He put me on the spot asking who would be the X factor. Like, I don't know who the X factor would be for Carolina in this game. It would have to be someone defensively. And I said, maybe Jewell. Think he's been playing pretty well of late. Carolina's going to have to get some takeaways in this game against Philadelphia, and he could punch the ball out. And if he's not going to play, and we'll find out how serious hamstring is. He had that issue earlier this year. We had a groin and a hamstring that cost him to miss 3 games. If he cannot play, I guess Clyde and Charles is probably back in line to start with. Trevin Wallace, and it wouldn't be ideal against the Eagles running attack to have Jewell out on Sunday. We'll get more information again on Friday afternoon when Canales speaks to the media. JT Sanders had a neck injury in that Kansas City game. That was scary. Fortunately, it was far more precautionary than actually being that serious. Dave Canales came out and said even the day after that they avoided any sort of serious injury. Really, he avoided a serious injury, and thank God. Did not play last week. He's been limited the last 2 days on Wednesday and Thursday, and it's still TBD on whether he's able to play. Dave was hopeful at the beginning of the week that he would play. He was also hopeful at the beginning of the week that Jalen Coker would play on Sunday after missing the last 2 weeks with a quad injury. He was a full participant on Wednesday, limited on Thursday. I would think that Coker is going to play, where Sanders may end up being a game time decision. And with Stephon Sullivan injuring his knee, the Panthers not having Ian Thomas still, which I get it. You guys hate Ian Thomas, but still would be very nice to get JT Sanders back in this game. And really, I think it'd be just nice because Bryce Young's really cooking right now. And you want to be able to carry over some of this momentum that's being built with Bryce if he's going to be the quarterback again in 2025 with these young receivers who are supposed to be a part of this build here with Bryce under this new regime. So JT Sanders coming back and playing on Sunday, big for that and for the final 4 weeks of the season after that. Same thing with Jalen Coker, getting that continuity together, that chemistry, that is vital to the success for Bryce Young and for the Panthers offense moving forward for the rest of the 2024 season and ahead into 2025. The next guy, the last one to really focus in on here, hamstring. He has been on IR since October 25th. He has missed the past 5 games. He was designated to return last week as far as his practice window being opened up. He has been a full participant on Wednesday and on Thursday, and I would assume the same case will happen on Friday. It's going to come down to just numbers in the secondary, the depth chart, what they want to do there. Jadeveon viewed him, Jordan Fuller, and also Xavier Woods as their 3 starters at safety. Now, those other 2, Woods and Fuller, have been better than Scott, who really struggled last year in Cincinnati, but has been better, I think, this year in Carolina, even if the tackling has been a problem, as it has been a problem for a lot of guys here this season. We'll see how that plays out. That's a decision that Dave and the organization would make on Saturday, like they typically do when it comes to elevating guys off the practice squad and then activating guys off of IR and all that. So we'll see how that plays out, as he would be the other name to look at as far as the injury report goes heading into that game on Sunday up in Philadelphia. But that's going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back with you next Wednesday answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get those questions into me following Sunday's game. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all live right here on YouTube on Sunday following the Carolina Panthers upset, maybe win against Philadelphia Eagles.